Europe is one of our favorite places to visit, and thanks to being able to book flights there for next to nothing, it's a place that we and many members of our community keep going back to. Listen in as we talk all about how to use points and miles to fly to Europe. Welcome to Points Talk with the Travel Mom Squad. We are three moms who've discovered how to leverage credit card welcome offers to get hundreds of thousands of dollars of travel expenses for nearly free. We've used credit card points and miles to take vacations to places like Hawaii, Paris, Greece, Maldives, Japan, and so much more. And the best part, we each still have 800 plus credit scores. Imagine being able to take the vacation of your dreams for nearly free. It's totally possible, and we're here to show you how. Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Pam, Alex's mom.
And I'm Jess. Let's talk points. Today, we are talking all about flights to Europe. I think each one of us usually goes to Europe at least once a year, often even more, thanks to being able to use points and miles to get there. I think I'm going 5 times this year to Europe. So
That's because you're following Taylor.
Oh, I'm following Taylor, but yeah. So, but being able to score flights.
That is not normal. Don't feel like you need to keep up with Jess.
Yeah. Even if you just want to go to Europe one time a year, this is a perfect episode for you. But being able to score the flights for so cheap, we can often get them for just $5.60 out of pocket with a combination of points and miles. So today we're going to share some of our favorite ways to travel to Europe on points, plus how we upgrade economy tickets with certain airlines. So Pam, why don't you kick us off with our episode all about Europe?
So I was just running in my head. I am going 5 times this year also, and I'm not chasing Taylor Swift around the world. But on my defense, I also have a daughter who lives in London. And so I usually get over there a couple times a year just to visit her. Or if I'm going on a credit card points and miles trip, the last few days of my trip, I'll go over to Europe. And that's one of the reasons we love, love, love Europe. Once you get over there, everything is so close. And I think when I started traveling over to see her, I really got this love of travel, because even before I was doing credit card points and miles, I realized that once I got over there, I could take a cheap flight to go over to another country. And so she and I went to Croatia one time. We went to Italy. And all of this was before I even did credit card points and miles. And now it's like just really become one of my favorite places. There are so many cheap carriers that if you can just get yourself over to Paris, get yourself over to London, then you can take EasyJet, Ryanair over to the other places. So sometimes that's kind of what I do. Maybe I'm trying to go to, in fact, we did that in going to Croatia and to several other places where I'm just trying to get myself to Paris, and then I'm going to take that cheap carrier over to the other country. You can also travel by train. I especially have done this often when I've traveled to Italy. Their train system there is great. All over Europe, it's great. My first big trip ever was with my parents and my 2 older daughters. And we flew into London. And pretty much from there, we took trains everywhere that we went. And we went all over Europe. And so it works out. It's just such a great way to travel. It's nice to sit back, watch the scenery, get more of the flavor of the land that you're traveling through. And it's really, really nice. When you're traveling to Europe, you should expect to pay about 30 to 40K in economy, especially if you're traveling during the summer, during holiday time, and 55 to 90K in business. Honestly, I find a lot of business class flights for around 90 now. Some you'll see when you get onto sites, you'll see them for like 155K. I'm not paying that. I'm going to find a better deal than that. But I'm not opposed to paying, close to 100K if it works out for me.
And these are one way. I just want to make that clear. So 30 to 40K miles, and they're miles. They're not dollars. So 30 to 40K miles for economy, $55 to $90K for business one way.
And I would say too that this is an average. So can you sometimes find them for less than 30K? Yes. Can you find them for more than 40K? Yes. And so for the economy flights, and same with the business class, I don't think you'll really find less than 50K very often, but you'll definitely find it for more than 90K, like my mom was saying. So these are the averages. Don't go in thinking, well, this is how much all the flights are going to be is 30K anytime I want to go to Europe, because that's not how it's probably going to play out. But just to give you a rough idea of what you could potentially expect to pay.
Right. And one thing to note too, like I said, I fly to London a lot. Flying into London, I don't pay as much in taxes and surcharges, but you will pay a lot more when you fly out of London. So I just know that going in. And I know that when I'm flying out of London, I'm going to pay a lot more in taxes and surcharge. And that's just not much you can do about that. You can, even if you're anywhere in the UK, you're going to pay more. You can try to take a cheap flight to another place in Europe and fly from there. You can save that. But, for me, time is money too. And I'd rather just get on my flight and go home. So I just know that going in, and when I'm paying for my flight, I just eat those taxes and surcharges. One of my favorite ways to get to Europe has always been United. And that goes back to the fact that where I used to live and where I raised my children, United was the only airline. So when I would go to Europe, that is how I flew. That is how I used to think I was using credit card points and miles, because I would travel there enough times that once in a great while I would get a free flight there. And I thought that I had really scored. I prefer, when I'm flying United, is to use bonuses from United co-branded cards. There are several of them. I usually have one of these at least, because I like the benefits. I usually have the Explorer card because I like to get that priority seating and free check bags. But there is the Explorer, there is the Quest, and there is a business card. There's also an entry-level gateway, which I've never had. So usually, if you hold one of these cards, you can get what's called a saver fare. And it's really worthwhile if you're going to fly United at any time to hold one of their cards, because you can save substantially. Usually going over to Europe, you're going to find the saver rate is going to be about 40K. Again, whenever I say 40K, just know that Pam means in miles or points. I'm never talking about cash, but that's just how my mind thinks. And in economy, it's usually about 88K is what I'm looking.
You mean in business, it's 8K?
In business, I'm sorry. Business, it's 8K. Now, saver business can be really hard to find now. I think they changed things a while ago, kind of changed their chart awards, and everything went up. And the saver business is definitely harder to find. But the site booking on United is really, really easy. One of my favorite things is to look at the 30-day calendar. And that is I can see a whole month. And I can be flexible, I can find a lot better deal than I can if I'm just going to, I've got to go this day and I've got to come back this day. Their site is very easy, very beginner friendly, one of the easiest sites that there is to use. United is also a transfer partner of Chase. I have only used that feature, transferring Ultimate Rewards to United, one time, because like I said, I tend to get the co-branded card on this. I have through the years, and it is probably the one co-branded card that I always will get, especially when the sign-up bonus is high. It's probably the one co-branded card that I will always keep. And that is too, because not only did I move from a place where there was just United, I now live near Denver, which is a hub of United. So it makes sense.
Another thing I want to say is going back to how easy and beginner friendly United is, especially if you're just starting out. So some of these other airlines we're going to talk about a little later, we're going to be talking about booking with one airline, but you're actually flying on another. And what I like about with United is it's just so easy because most of the time, maybe you're going to be flying on another airline, but working with United, if anything happens with your flight and anything changes, it is so easy to work with a domestic airline to get those things fixed versus I'm working with Turkish Airlines to work all this out, and it's a headache. When you're just starting out, it's so easy to just stick with the domestic carriers that in case things happen, it's just much easier. So it's easy to book your flight. It's easier to deal with anything that happens all across the board. It's just simple. So if you're just starting out, I recommend United.
And I actually like United international flights. For years, that's all I traveled was economy or economy plus. I would get the bulkhead seat. I really like their Polaris business class. I think it's a really good product. So if I could always find great deals on United, I would probably be flying them at least 50% of the time. I just don't find as many good deals as I used to find, but I love flying United to Europe.
But keep in mind, when she says find good deals, she's talking business class because that's the only way Pam travels these days.
Well, you got it. Yeah. When you're 70 years old and your knees hurt and your back hurts,
you don't need to make any excuses, Mom. You own it. You earn the points.
That's right.
You own it.
That's right. And I'm not having to fly a family. So, yep, that is honestly, that is how I usually fly.
Because you don't have children. I love when you say that, Pam. I love when Pam's talking about it. And she's like, well, I don't have children, so I can fly business. And I'm like, well, you do have children. One of them is on this podcast right now. You just have grown children.
Yeah, I have 5 children. I guess I don't have to pay for children anymore. That's what I need to be saying.
Yes. Yeah. So I just want to share a couple examples of flights I recently booked on United. So I have opened United cards throughout the years. I've had, I think, the United business card twice. I've had the Explorer card. So I've had a nice little stockpile of them that I hadn't used in a bit. And so my mom and sisters and I were planning a trip to Portugal and the Azores. And so we are flying home from the Azores on United Airlines. So I use United miles for that. And it's 40,000 points to Salt Lake, which this flight was over $1,000 if I had to pay cash for it. And so that's a huge savings. And United is one of, I think it's just United and Azores Airlines that fly from the Azores to the US. And so having those United miles really came in clutch for that flight. And it's economy, but I'm going to cross my fingers and maybe try to at least upgrade to premium economy eventually.
I don't think there is even business for this flight. Did you see if there was?
I didn't look, but
yeah, I don't think there was because I would have done it because spoiler alert, Pam is flying in premium economy because I have elite status. So when I booked it, it automatically gave me premium
They
economy.
just might not have lay flat on this plane. But I just booked economy. My seat's in economy, and I'm going to look into upgrading to premium economy as it gets a little bit closer. And then this summer, my husband and I, so that trip's not till the fall, but this summer, my husband and I are going to Greece. And then from Greece, we're going to London for a couple of days to visit my sister. And once again, I used United miles for him and I to fly home from the United cards we'd opened in the past. And that was also 40,000 miles to Salt Lake. So we'll have a connection in Denver and then we'll go to Salt Lake. The nice thing is the flight times were great. There's no crazy itinerary. And so I'm willing to pay 40,000 miles, which is maybe on the higher side for an economy flight, when I already have them in my United cards. There's nothing else I can do with those points except use them for United miles. So I'm like, might as well use those. And the flight times work out really nice. And so that's another thing I think is nice for United is they have a lot of flights. They're a very major airline. And so you're going to have good luck finding availability. So hopping on to one of my favorites is Air France. So Air France is a transfer partner of all the major banks. And what's really, really awesome about them is on Air France and on KLM operated flights, you can get 25% off award flights for kids that are ages 11 and younger. So that is a really unique thing that they offer. I haven't done it yet, but I'm planning on taking advantage of this when we go to Europe with my kids. I've flown Air France. Well, I have flown Air France a number of times, but I've flown KLM. They operate a flight from Salt Lake City to Amsterdam, and I've done that flight 3 times now, once in business class, twice in premium economy. So I actually booked economy, and I paid a couple, like under $200 to upgrade to premium economy, the bulkhead seat. And so it's a really, really great option. The other thing that's really nice is they're a partner with Delta. So I've also booked Delta flights through Air France, not just KLM and Air France flights. I did this coming home from Paris, and the flight booked through Air France, the Delta operated flight through Air France, was significantly cheaper than had I booked it directly with Delta. So it's a really great option. I love that they're a transfer partner of all the 4 banks, super easy to earn points with them. Yeah.
So I just was looking at someone trying to help somebody with some points and miles, and looking at booking a Delta flight through Air France, just like you're saying. And it was like 38K from, I can't remember where it was from, but then I went to Delta and it was 78K. I mean, it's can be significantly less. So it is a really good option for if you're, looking at wanting to fly a Delta flight, but don't book there.
Yeah. And another thing too is we're flying, when we go to Portugal, we're flying into London, and then we're going to take a cheap flight over to Lisbon. But we booked Virgin Atlantic, but we're flying Virgin Atlantic, but we booked it via Air France. And that helped us save on the fuel surcharges, because Virgin Atlantic costs an exorbitant amount when you use your points to fly with them. So we're flying Virgin Atlantic upper class, booked through Air France, and I think our taxes and fees were maybe $200. If we were doing it through Virgin Atlantic, it would have been close to $1,000. So that was another great option for, if you're wanting to look into that. Other really cool thing about Air France is every month they come out with Flying Blue promo awards. And these will be through different destinations where for a certain time period, you can get flights from A to Z, and it'll cost you this much amount of points. You can find flights when they do these sales for 15,000 points or miles one way from the US to Europe. That is so cheap. 15,000 points. So you can get some really, really cheap flights by going through Air France and taking advantage of those Flying Blue promo awards. I will say that Air France does have a little higher taxes and fees than some airlines. I think it can sometimes be around $100 in economy, but when you're spending so little miles to get there, it's well worth it, in my opinion.
And those Flying Blue promo awards are really, really good. We do write a post every month that's on the website about the current promo awards. So if you're thinking about going to Europe, check. I would say almost every month there is some sort of award for that cheap. Honestly, Alex stole this as being her favorite way. This is without a doubt my favorite way to get to Europe. You can just find the best deals. You can find business class seats for like 50,000 points. It is the best deal going to Europe. In fact, I have a post that I wrote that we'll publish later about why I think it's the best deal. We leave tomorrow. I leave to going to Kenya for a safari. I think we've talked about it before. My husband and I are flying on Air France from JFK all the way to Kenya. So we go to Paris and then on to Kenya, and it was 107,000 in business class. That's pretty amazing because that's a really, really long flight. I am such a fan of Air France. I'm such a fan of their Flying Blue promo awards. So check them out.
What's nice too is sometimes, with a lot of these airlines we're going to mention, but Air France in particular, they will have transfer bonuses sometimes from different banks. And so when I booked my flight to London for this trip that I'm doing with my mom and sisters, there was a 25% transfer bonus from Chase. And normally, if you've listened to other podcasts, you know that we like to save our Chase points for Hyatt. But in this case, I was like, I can get 25% off. I'm going to transfer my Chase points. So I think it was like maybe 57,000 points with the transfer bonus. So it was pretty excited to get a business class flight for that little. So if you can stack Flying Brew promo awards, 25% off award flights, and a transfer bonus, you're not going to get a better deal. Okay, Jess, what about you?
I've never actually flown Air France, which is, I feel like I should
You've got FOMO now. Jess is feeling the FOMO.
I've got FOMO. No, but my favorite, this is not going to come as a shock to anyone. My favorite way to get to Europe is on the Singapore Airlines Fifth Freedom flight between Houston and Manchester. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that I'm going to Europe 5 times this year, and 3 of those times I'll be flying this route to get there. So it's just, Singapore Airlines is an amazing airline. The service is incredible. The food is great. The planes are great. And so I feel fortunate that I have this option from Houston. And I know a lot of you listening are in the Houston area also. So you can go in economy for 25,000 Singapore miles and $5.60 from Houston to Manchester. Coming home, like Pam said, the UK, the taxes and fees are a little bit higher, but in economy, it's around $150 a person, which I feel like for the UK taxes is on the lower side. So that's for economy. For business, it's going to be around 81,000 miles going there and coming home. So, you can get 3 economy tickets for what you're going to spend on a business class ticket. So it just kind of depends on how many miles you have and how many miles you're willing to spend on these tickets. The nice thing about Singapore is that they are a transfer partner of all 4 major banks. And so it is pretty easy to rack up the miles that you need for a Singapore flight. I do not vacation in Manchester. I sort of just use this flight as a jumping off point. So, for example, we went to Scotland earlier this year. We flew into Manchester and took the train. I'm going to London to see Taylor Swift. And so my mom and I are flying into Manchester, and then we're taking the train to London. I personally love taking the train. I am an anxious flyer and I don't like flying, despite the fact that I do it quite often. And so anytime I have an alternative, I am going to take it. And so I find the train much more relaxing and I don't mind it at all. So that is, and I love a nonstop flight. I would rather take a nonstop flight somewhere and then hop on a train to my final destination than sit at an airport. So that is why I love Singapore so much.
Well, I'm actually doing that flight, Jess, when I go to Greece. So I am flying to Houston and then flying to Manchester. And then a few hours later, I'm taking a flight from Manchester to Santorini. So it's a lot of flights. I would prefer, but I can't take the train.
Okay, well,
I can't take the train to Greece.
Hit me up when you're in Houston.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, hit me up.
Not to the island of Santorini.
You can't take anything to Santorini other than a ferry or a plane. One thing I forgot to mention, though, is I also find it really easy to find availability on Singapore, especially if you are flying in economy. My family of 6 has flown Singapore economy multiple times. And that's another thing I love about it. A lot of these deals, it's kind of hard to find availability for more than 1 or 2 people. But Singapore, especially if you book in advance, super easy. So, all right, Pam, what do you have for us next?
Well, another way that I have flown to Europe quite often is by booking through Avianca LifeMiles and then flying on a Star Alliance flight. So I've done this economy and actually more often business class. I found some 63K miles to Europe if I can find it. It's harder. It's a lot easier to find economy class. I will say that I think now Avianca's website, you have to look under lifemiles.com. It's kind of a clunky website. Really takes, you have to kind of stick with it and just kind of figure it out. It's not my favorite website. but it is a transfer partner from Amex and Capital One. And so that makes it nice. I primarily, when I travel to Europe, use Amex membership rewards and Capital One miles, saving my Chase Ultimate rewards for Hyatt stays, of course. And so Avianca is a really good option when you're looking to go to Europe. Like I said, 63K to Europe. I used to be able to find that pretty regularly. It is harder to find. I'll tell you when it's easier to find. If you're looking kind of last minute, like if you're looking in the next, month to 3 months, I can find it. When I'm looking farther out, I don't think that the partner sites are giving out as much award availability. When I was traveling to Croatia, originally I had a flight on United for 63K over to Croatia. Things changed and we had to kind of change things out. One of the things that I don't like about Avianca is that there is a cancellation fee. And so that can be a little wonky. So if you are going to book there, know that you're going to book there. You don't want to pay the cancellation. It might have been as much as $200. I can't remember for sure. But it's definitely a site that I still will go and look at. And certainly for if you want to fly a Star Alliance flight in economy, you can find a lot of availability.
If you're wondering, how do I know which points transfer to which airline? How do I know which airlines are in the same alliance? I've got good news for you. Head to the link in the show notes to get our free transfer partner and airline alliance cheat sheet.
Okay, so the next one that I'm going to bring up, it's not something that I have done. So I want to say it's one of my favorite ways, but I definitely think it's something that's worth mentioning because I think there's some people who this could work really well for, and that is using the Chase travel portal to book flights to Europe. So if there's cheap cash rates going on, for example, Scott's Cheap Flights, well, now it's called Going, but if you're subscribed to them or any of those other flight finder deals, or you just happen to see a really cheap flight to Europe, you can then go onto the portal and it should be a low rate and points as well. And sometimes it can be cheaper than if you were to transfer your points out. And I think the nice thing about this for some people is if you don't care about using your points for Hyatt, like we like to use them for Hyatt and get 2 cents per point typically. If you're like, I don't really stay at Hyatt, or maybe I stay in boutique hotels, or I don't really care, I just want to get my cost as low to zero as possible, then the portal can be a really great option because when you book in the portal, it'll even cover your taxes and your fees. So you can actually get your flight for $0. So if Hyatt's not a huge importance to you, transferring your points isn't that big of a deal for you, or you just want to get your flights to zero, then booking in the portal when there's cheap cash rates might be a really great option. So just something to keep in mind for those people. It's also really easy because you just go in, find your flight, book it, and it's like done for you.
All right, next up from me is going to be Emirates. This is another one that is a transfer partner of all 4 of the banks. And so again, pretty easy to rack up those Emirates miles. For economy, okay, so first of all, this is another Fifth Freedom flight. I'm like a Fifth Freedom flight lover. I feel like there is a Fifth Freedom flight between JFK and Milan, and I took it with my husband last year. I'm going on that flight again this summer. And so that's an amazing route. Emirates is an incredible airline. And so to be able to fly it from the US to Italy is a great option to get to Europe. Economy is going to run you around 38,750 miles and $54 in taxes on the way there. Taxes on the way home are around $90. So as you can see, flying from Europe anywhere other than the UK, the taxes are going to be much lower. So another benefit of not flying into or out of the UK. For business in Emirates, it's going to be around 87,000 miles and $100 in taxes. And yeah, I am actually flying. So I'm flying business class from JFK to Milan, but then coming home, I am flying economy. So I've flown business class on Emirates, I've flown first class on Emirates, and now I'm going to experience economy. So I can give a review of all 3, although I am probably going to try to upgrade at check-in to business on the way home. But for now, I have a flight in economy booked for my flight home from Milan.
So I just wanted to quickly say about one of the airlines that we haven't mentioned. They did a huge devaluation of the miles to book, but I still have loved Turkish. It's still big for me. It's been a great way to get to Europe in the past. You could find 45K flights in business, which is amazing. Now it's got up to 65K to 85K, and they're harder to find. I think the hardest thing about Turkish is that they don't have the greatest customer service. It's harder to work with them. It's harder to book them. But I just have to say that I'll still be looking because I really like a Turkish airline as a airline. And so I'll still be looking. I mean, if I can find even 65K or 85K, I'm going to snag them.
And that's business class too.
Yes. Well, Pam, and now I think it's around, if you can find the promo awards, I think it's 30K in economy. But Pam, they have a nonstop flight now from Denver to Istanbul on Turkish Airlines that I am actually taking. One of my trips to Europe this year, I'm flying from Denver to Istanbul because they released a batch of business class availability for 65,000 miles, which I still think, I mean, the devaluation was very upsetting, but I still think 65,000 miles in business class to Europe is a great deal.
You just need to pack your patience when booking with Turkish sometimes.
Exactly.
And the availability is not like Singapore, Air France, Emirates. These all have much easier to find availability than Turkish does. And so you got to kind of work for the value in Turkish.
Exactly. But I wouldn't write it off, but I wouldn't say that it's beginner friendly.
I would even say because the 65K in business is just to get to Istanbul. But then if you want to go somewhere else in Europe, then you're looking at 85K.
Right.
So it could even potentially be worth it to just get to Istanbul and try to find a cheap flight on somewhere like Ryanair or EasyJet.
That's what I'm doing because it was going to be 80. We're going to Vienna is where we're going. And so it was going to be 85K to go all the way to Vienna. Or what we did is I booked the flight to Istanbul and then I booked a separate flight to Vienna for $100 out of pocket, And so to me, it made more sense to book them separately than to do the 85K.
Yeah, but for those of you that are a little bit more experienced, don't write them off because it is a great experience. So you may be wondering how you find these deals now. So we don't usually look from airline to airline. We love to use award flight search engines. We do have a post that talks about that. I think we'll probably link that in the show notes. But some of the ones that I particularly like to use, there's a couple free ones that I use a lot when looking for award flights. The two that I really recommend that are free are Rome and then points.com. They both are really good. And I'm someone who lots of times when I'm looking for award flights, I will often look at 2, 3, sometimes even 4 sites, because sometimes you'll just find different flights that maybe another one isn't picking up that day or that minute that you're looking. I will even sometimes look one day and look another day. I've been looking and found a flight that I think I want to take, then go back a few hours later and something else pops up. So it definitely availability comes and goes with these. A couple of the paid sites that I like are Points Me. It is a subscription based, or you can pay for 1 day for $4.99. Is that right, guys?
It's something like that.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Since I have a subscription, I don't really pay that much attention. If you have an American Express card, you can do free searches when using American Amex transfer partners only. You're not going to be able to find flights if you're trying to say, look with Chase Ultimate Rewards.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about upgrading your economy tickets. A lot of people ask us, okay, I booked economy, but I really want to fly business class. How do I do that? And it really varies a lot by airline. But my biggest thing that I want to stress is if you really want business class, the only way to guarantee that you're going to get business class is to book business class. So that's what we do. When we want to fly business class, we use our points, we use our miles, and we book business class seats. And sometimes it can be a little bit of work finding the right dates. Might have to shuffle things around, have to be flexible. But if you want business class, you're going to have to book it from the get-go. Or if you're more flexible, and sometimes that's how we are, you can roll the dice. So, for example, we went on our trip to Singapore and we booked premium economy. Jess and I booked premium economy there and back. And both times, like, so on the way there, I looked in the app. There's different options where you can click to see about upgrading your flight, but it wasn't giving us the options. I even looked on the app to see if any flights were for sale. There were no business class flights for sale. It's completely sold out. Jess even asked them at the check-in in San Francisco, is there by any chance any business class seats left? And like, no, we're all the way full. So I would start there by looking on the app, do a search like you're going to buy the business class seat. And if there's availability, then you can ask the people at the ticket counter. So on the flight home, that's what we did. We were at the airport. I had tried this stuff on the Singapore Airlines app where there's a thing where you can go to like request upgrade. I think it's 72 hours before your flight. And it didn't give me the option. So I'm like, well, I guess we won't be able to upgrade. But then when we got to the airport, I looked up, I saw that there were seats on the plane still in business class that were empty. So we asked the lady at the ticket counter, and there we were able to pay, just put it on our credit card, the difference to upgrade. So that's one way you can do it. Jess has also upgraded with miles. Jess, do you want to tell them about that experience with Emirates?
Yeah, so Emirates is one of the few airlines that allows you to upgrade with miles at check-in. And yeah, so we just got to the airport around 3 hours before our flight. And I went up to check in and I said, do you have any availability we were in business class and we wanted to upgrade to first. And they said yes. And it was 30,000 Emirates miles per person to do that. And so I had already transferred those points to my Emirates account because I was just nervous that if I did it right then and there, that it was going to be delayed and I wasn't going to be able to do it. So I had those sitting in my account waiting to be used. And luckily they were able to just pull the miles out of my account and just issue me the upgrade right there at the check-in counter for the first class upgrade.
And that, I'm assuming you're going to do that same thing when you try to upgrade to business class.
Yeah, I'm hoping to do the same thing coming back. When I booked these flights coming home from Milan, the business class flights were not like the saver availability. They were the higher one. And so it was like going to be 148,000 miles. And the flight from Milan to JFK isn't that long. And so I was like, it is not worth 140 something miles for that. So I just got economy. And I mean, Emirates is really nice. I'm sure even economy will be fine for a daytime flight home, but I'm going to see at check-in if it's possible.
So another option that I like to do if I'm flying United or Delta, for example, I will just upgrade via the app. So, or you can do it on the website, but usually, so I'll even look starting fairly soon, even when I book my flight. Like, so for example, like I said before, we're flying United home from London this summer, my husband and I. And as soon as I booked those economy tickets, I just went to go see for fun what the price was going to be to upgrade. So you just go to your flight details after I purchased. I go to my flight details and like the select seat option, and then it shows you all the other seats available. It's like $5,000 to upgrade to United Polaris coming home. And I'm like, yeah, that ain't going to happen. But, and even like premium economy is pretty expensive. And so what I'll do is I'll just keep watching that as it gets closer. Every now and then I'll just hop on my United account. The business class hasn't dropped. And honestly, like I don't really expect that to drop until check-in, like 24 hours before the flight or even the morning of the flight. So for example, I had booked a flight on United Economy for 35,000 points from San Francisco No, it might have been from Salt Lake. It doesn't really matter. I was going from one of those cities to Tahiti, and I paid 35,000 miles, really great price. But I didn't really want to say in economy because it's a really long flight, and my mom and my sister were in business class, but it was 155,000 miles, and I'm like, I'm not paying that. And they didn't pay that. I think maybe my sister did, but my mom had some different thing from her United status that helped her get it. So I was like, I'm not paying that much. And so I kept looking to see how much it was going to cost to upgrade, kept looking, check-in, looked, still $5,000. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So the morning of the flight, I woke up in the morning really early to fly to San Francisco. I get on the app and it was like $899. And I was like, this is a pretty long flight. When am I like, this is one of the top bucket list trips. I'm going to upgrade to United Polaris because it was just me going. So I didn't have to worry about upgrading anybody else. And so even if if you look at check-in, you're like, oh, it's still a lot of money. Look the next morning, look the day of your flight and see if it's dropped some more. So I'm really hoping that when I go, I actually sometimes will look at my flight coming home from London to see how many Polaris seats are still left. There's a lot on this plane. They even on this plane have the United Premium Plus, which is the recliner seats, but they don't have very many of those, and those are almost gone. And those are like $3,000. And I'm like, I'm not paying that. That's ridiculous. So I'm hoping best case scenario, the night at check-in, I go to check-in and they drop to like $500, and then I can upgrade the two of us. So wish me luck, everybody. I'll come back and let you all know if we were able to upgrade. But yeah, so I do the same thing with Delta. I will just look periodically. I upgrade more with Delta. I actually haven't ever flown Delta business class, but I've flown premium economy a lot. And I'll do that for domestic flights. If I'm like, oh, I just, want to have some more leg room, a more comfortable seat, it gets cheaper as it gets closer to your flight. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then Jess has a rule that she uses for upgrading lie flat seats. So share with us your rule because I like it and I've adopted it and it's now my rule because I'm always like, do I not? And I will say it's just like, there's no like research done for this. It's just an arbitrary thing you came up with, right? But I like it. And so I'm like, it's something to be like, okay, worth it, not worth it.
Yeah. So I am willing to pay up to $100 an hour for lie flat seats on a long haul flight. And that is just an arbitrary number that I have come up with in my head. You may be thinking, that's crazy. I would never pay that much. Or you may be thinking, wow, she's so cheap. So this is one of those you do you, Pam moments where you just have to decide what you are comfortable with. I personally value my comfort on a plane at $100 an hour is what I've decided. So like Alex said, when we came home from Singapore, our upgrade was going to be around, including the refund we got from our seats, like $1,250. It was a 14.5-hour flight. So I was willing to spend up to $1,450. I ended up spending less than that. And I was very happy with that decision.
So you guys can see that there are so many ways to fly to Europe on points, and we are just barely scratching the surface. We didn't even mention Air Canada and Virgin Atlantic, which are also great options. If you need a little extra help figuring out transfer partners and airline alliances, don't forget to get our free transfer partners sheet linked in the show notes.
Thanks so much for listening to Points Talk with the Travel Mom Squad. Make sure to hit the subscribe or follow button from wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. Want to start jet setting even faster? Follow the links in the show notes to learn about everything we discussed in today's episode. And to stay connected and follow along, follow us on Instagram at Travel Mom Squad. We can't wait to see where in the world points and miles take you.